In this episode, we welcome back the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs with returning guest Kaya King, along with Dean Daffis, the Director of the Office of Eviction Prevention and the Division of Housing and Community Resources.
And, Dean, I think I'm so glad that we're talking about the misconceptions, because I think, especially in thinking about why this episode was so important, let's be frank, this is one of the worst instances that could ever happen to someone. And I think for some of this, there's a shame, right? Especially when we look at so many hardworking families, right? We're talking parents, we're talking folks who've got multi-generation, right? They're trying to keep food on the table and survive. These are not folks who are not trying to not pay their bills. They want to pay their rent. And we've learned, I think, in COVID, and I think it brought some humanity back of this could touch anybody. You didn't have to be of a certain, demographic, or folks who were doing okay had a complete tailspin. And, what this made me kind of think of a bit is that some of this and that shame point really stops folks from asking the questions, getting that help, because you don't want to be scarlet lettered. And it recalled for me a little bit. I had done some level of work for a county services, social services agency years back. And one of those areas had to deal with litigation regarding ensuring there was child support when you're dealing with temporary assistance for needy families, right? Food assistance, Medicaid. And I can't tell you how many times I'd walk in and, you'd have to seek a child support order, right? Because the taxpayer dollars try to make up that difference. But I would have the custodial parent who was coming in, who had to come in to get this assistance, and they would be embarrassed.
Of course.
And I remember literally sitting in a particular hearing, and this one mom says, she's in tears, and I go to her, I'm like, "Are you okay?" She's like, "I know I have to be here, but I have worked my entire life to never have to do this. I don't want to ask anybody for money. I know how to work. I work as hard as I can. I just can't work any more jobs. And I had to do this as a last resort." And I think saying that very clearly, that these things and people getting these circumstances are not a choice, right? No one, I think, wants to, be in a world, in a reality where, they're handed something. This is a free ticket. It's like, this is desperate times and some of the worst elements of somebody's life. And then really being able to have the info that they need and not feel shame and not say that you don't live this, right? This is an isolated incident that has a perfect combination of forces outside of your control, which I think a lot of these misconceptions paint so articulately. And how are we deciding to say, you don't have to be intimidated, you don't have to be afraid to get information, to get support, to get counsel, and you get to assert your rights. You're entitled to that.
Absolutely. I mean, it is a very traumatic experience. Mm-hmm. And psychologically, it causes folks to break down. And even when they know, oh my goodness, I got to do something here, I got to get help, it's disabling because of the stigma and the harm. And that is why when we built this program, and every single day when I speak to my staff and we talk to people in crisis who are calling us, we keep this in mind, that our job is to get people resources, to be as efficient as we can be, remove barriers, be as flexible as we can be. People first, paper second is our motto, right?
I like that.
Of course we need documentation, right? But we cannot keep the documentation from getting people the help they need. The courts are not going to wait for us. The judges don't want to adjourn these cases. They don't want backlogs. Right. They want to move. They want to process these cases. So we need the documentation, certainly, but we cannot use that as a reason, as another barrier.
Right.
We want to reduce harm reduction, housing first, harm reduction. Those are our principles that we're guided by. So when we speak to people, we never want to add to their trauma or to their shame and stigma and say things like, why didn't you pay your rent for so many months? And how is it that you expect to stay in this apartment if you can't sustain yourself going forward? In fact, we've been very successful in homelessness prevention and eviction prevention in working with HUD and DC in waiving some of the legacy requirements to getting people prevention assistance, which included back in the day that you had to prove yourself that you're going to be sustainable, which is outrageous, right? The majority of Americans don't have a savings or very little savings, don't have a budget that they operate within. It's paycheck to paycheck, 2 working families, right? No childcare. Housing is not as affordable and accessible as it can be for most families in the nation. And here we are going to the most vulnerable folks and saying, in order for me to pay back 3 months or 6 months of the rent that you owe, you have to produce a budget for me and prove that you can sustain yourself in that apartment. Otherwise, I can't pay it. And thankfully, we waived that. And we've been able to extend the waiver through the great advocacy of our commissioner and some of our, awesome colleagues, Kaya at DCA. But these are the kinds of things, like we have to, it's not just getting to folks and letting them know that help is available. It's not just bringing the network of providers together so there aren't silos and we're not making people call you and then go to another community organization, ask the same questions, the same paperwork. We're making it efficient, right? We're connecting people, we're coordinating the intervention, but we're also building a more empathic system. And we're also encouraging our partners out on the ground to evolve in how they directly serve clients, to think about it in this new way. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge. Even the most well-meaning organizations who have a long, strong history of assisting folks and transforming lives are still trying to evolve and get away from, do you have a W-9? Do you have a budget? Do you have a lease? Most people don't have a lease anymore, folks. We got to move beyond that. Can we establish the tenancy, the relationship to the landlord in some other way? Of course we can. So, it's sort of like breaking down those historical, structural barriers to getting people the help that they need.